Hello and welcome to the Right Path Podcast. Folks, this podcast is done by authors. It's about authors. It's for authors. This is the place where being an actual author still matters. This is the place where we share our journeys, where we explore our creativity, where we examine the why behind it all. Folks, this is the place where we find out the story behind the scenes. Please welcome to the show our guest today. He's a father, he's a trial lawyer, he's a writer. He's the author of the hit book, Pretend They Are Dead. Please welcome Steve Eichenblatt. Steve, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, Rory. It's good to be on here with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. Me too. Me too. Well, I'll tell you what. We've got a lot to dive into here, and I know there's a whole bunch of story behind this book and in this book. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, brother, and let's kind of get this ball rolling.
Sure. Just quick bio is I live in Orlando, Florida now. I'm a trial lawyer, have had a law partner in a firm since 1993. So probably some of your listeners weren't even alive back when my law firm started. I'm finding that the lawyers on the other side were kids I coached in baseball, and that's a unique experience. But I'm here still practicing law. I love it. I've got five kids, four boys and one girl. I adopted one of them. And, I grew up in New Jersey, moved to Sarasota, Florida, and then kind of made my way to law school at University of Florida and to Orlando. So
Nice.
that is me.
Nice. Quite the upgrade going to Florida from New Jersey, because I've been to New Jersey too. I
Yeah,
spent some time there when I
yeah.
was younger. That's for
I
sure.
moved there when I was a senior in high school. That wasn't fun, and I was at some low points, but
Wow. Yeah.
that's how you that's okay.
Yeah.
Makes you stronger. It definitely makes you stronger.
Right. The book itself. Now, is the book your story, or is it a story based on your story?
No, it's definitely my story.
Your
It's
story.
it's definitely my story, and there is a lot in there that is not just unique to me but just unique in the way it's set up because there's writing from my biological father in there and his sort of his journey, and combined into mine. And one of the things too is when you ask that question is I spent a lot of time like researching, making sure that the stories were somewhat accurate, that they weren't just like exaggerated in my head. So
Ah,
it's and so I spent a lot of time talking to people I knew like 30, 40 years ago, doing the research and make sure I had things as accurate as they could be, because you write a memoir, you don't want to be called out on something and say that wasn't a 20-pound bass, Steve. That was a 2-pound bass. They don't have 20-pound bass. So that kind of thing. So
right. So you've done your own fact checking on this with your
I
own history.
with my own history and certain family members,
Hmm.
to make sure that uh, see what they thought before it went to publication. So that's always interesting.
You're talking about some very rough times that have happened to you, and we're going to get into that here shortly. But since you just brought that up, whenever any of us start to share about some of the really difficult things we've been through, the family members, especially, and friends and so on that were around us at that time, sometimes it's not met, with the greatest, with
Yeah.
with the most receptive outlook. As you made sure everybody knew what was coming, and as you went to your family members and such, how was it received with what you're putting out there?
That's no, it's a great question, and it's interesting because just this is the cover, and I know some of this being videos, so pretend you're dead, and there's two of us. That's me and that's my twin sister.
Hmm.
Um, but there's actually three of us biological, and my brother, when you ask about how did they respond, he did not want to be a part of it. He was not, and I respected it. I respected it. I called him and said, "Do you mind if I use your baby picture for the cover?" And he said yes. And I said, "That's fine. I'm not judging you for that." But he was not a book supporter. He's a
Hmm.
supporter of me, but not the book because he doesn't see any reason, doesn't want to go back. He doesn't want to go back.
Right.
My twin sister, when I showed it to her, there's seven children, seven kids, seven brothers and sisters.
Wow.
When I talked to my sister about it and I had her read it beforehand, she told me that I was too easy. She said, "You weren't hard enough."
Ah,
And I said, I didn't write the book to trash people. That's not the point." And but she was kind of mad about that. She said, "Well, you should have been tougher in this area, that area." And this book is my journey. She has her own journey, and my when I showed it to my mother, I had her look at it before it went to publication. And when you grow up in a house where there's violence, and especially with a father, people naturally want to know where was mom during all this. So she is very nervous about it. All along, she's been supportive of me writing the book. I told her and shared a lot of things with her. But when it came time for the publication, and I sent it to her, she was she was so unhappy that she told me, I might have to commit suicide because of this book. And now that
wow.
is just my mother being dramatic, but because I gave her the courtesy of, I don't want the first time you see it to be when it hits the street. This is for
Right.
any memoir, right?
Yeah.
But I want you to know what's out there, and you've been a supporter. And she said she felt like the book was about her, but it had nothing. She's not even mentioned in the book. So it was really hard for her to work through some of those things. And Rory, to give you one very unique uh, example is when I love my mother, and she has since come around, and we have a great relationship, and she's a great person, and she went through her own trauma. But when I talked to her about the memoir, she said, "Well, we didn't have plastic on the furniture. You said in the book there's plastic on the furniture." And I said, she's like, "That's for people from the Bronx. We lived in New Jersey." And I'm like, "Mom, like this," I'm like, "You just told me to commit suicide, and this is what you're worried about? It's like plastic on the furniture."
Right.
Like, I remember plastic on the furniture, but maybe you don't. And she said, I don't want my friends reading that." And I was like, "Your friends are like 90 years old, so I don't think you're going to be reading my memoir. And your name's not in here." And but it just bothered her. And I said, "Well, I'll take it out." But I, which I did because it didn't really matter. But I did
Ah,
later call my brother and my sister and a couple others, and they all said, "Yeah, we had plastic on the furniture. Well, we weren't even allowed to sit on the furniture." But anyway, so just in getting the memoir and putting things together and going through that experience, that was pretty. That's a journey and some tough conversations. But
yeah.
this is my story and not theirs.
Sure. I mean, whenever you have something like this that comes up, it's a lot of tough conversations for everybody. So
It,
I can understand that.
It is, and when you read the book, and for the people who are out there who hopefully will buy it and read it, they'll understand the plastic on the furniture. And my mom's response to it is sort of, it was sort of how it was growing up. She was a little bit oblivious to what was really happening,
Mm,
which is protective method.
right. For sure. Yeah, I understand that. All right. So without giving away the secret sauce of the book, because I mean, hey, if people want to know the whole story, they can buy the book. That's that's why we
Right.
put it out there, right? What
Sure.
what what can you tell folks? What do you want to tell folks today? About your story. What happened to you, what you went through, those types of things, so that they have an idea of what the book's about, what it's going to cover, things of that nature.
Sure. I think one of the main reasons that I wrote the book was I thought I had a message to send to people who have gone through or going through hostile divorces, or abuse. As a lawyer, I've represented a lot of children who have been involved in the middle of abuse situations, and I also want to get across the message to people that are struggling, that don't spend your life as a victim. The
Hmm.
worst thing you can be is feel sorry for yourself or pitiful me or talk about all the horrible things that are happening to you, because I guarantee you there's people that are going through a lot worse. And even though I was a victim, I did not stay a victim, and I had to work hard to figure that out. It took me a long time to figure it out. So when I wrote the book, when I started the book, it took me about 10 years to actually finish it.
Well,
Um, and a lot of soul searching. I went through a couple divorces. I realized how some of the events in my past affected me, and the first um the first chapter of my book, and I don't mind talking about almost anything in the book because it's all factual. It's you'll read it and understand it, but my biological father left me when I was about 6 years old, dropped us off, and never came back. Lived in the same town, and
Wow.
I didn't know he was leaving, and my mother sent us away on vacation with my grandparents on a weekend. And when we came back, there was a new man in the house and his four kids, and this is my new father, and there was a bunch of new rules. And they never told us that they were getting married. I only met him like once or twice. But when you're a kid, and for anyone who's gone through abuse when you're young, like you almost like accept things. This is just another day, man. This is just like, okay, we're just going through another, you're 6, 7 years old, you do what your parents say, and so that was the beginning of a really difficult situation in my house because a man moved into the house uh, who later adopted me because my biological father had left, and he was just a nasty person all the way
Hmm.
around. And after um, my memoir was published, one of the first calls I got, which was pretty amazing, was I was in my law firm sitting there, and the receptionist says, "Hey, Steve, your Aunt Arlene is on the phone." And I'm thinking, Aunt Arlene, like I haven't talked to this woman in like 35 years. It was my adopted father's sister. So when I was young,
Hmm.
this was his sister. And I'm thinking, okay, she's gonna ream me out and tell me how horrible I am for writing this book. But instead, she said, I mean, she's like 85, 86 years old. She said, "Stephen, I want you to know that I always love you ever since you're a little kid, and I'll always think of you as my nephew. And I hated my brother every single day he walked on the earth, and I was happy when he died." That's what her own brother said. Their
My
own.
goodness.
So that's what she said about her own brother. So, the truth is, it made me feel sort of good. I'm not. I mean, I don't have a lot of empathy or sympathy for him, but just
Right.
that, hey, I wasn't hallucinating. This guy was not good. Um, so anyway, that's just,
Yeah.
part. I sort of answered your question, I guess.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you got some validation with
Right,
that.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from a lot of other people, um, validation in the way the book is written, and then later on, just validation from the sense that nobody knew what I went through. I never told anybody, and which I think is fairly common when you go through trauma.
Right. Right. The new guy showing up in the household, that with the way that you tell the story, it sounds like that was really fast. Was it as fast as it sounds?
It was fast. Yeah,
Ah,
it was fast. I mean, and I have gone back and talked to my mother about it, but my father left. He probably had been out of the house for 6 or 8 months. She met him. Richard is his name. She met Richard, and it was probably within like 2 to 3 months or so of meeting him that they made the decision to marry. He had 4 kids. We had 3 kids. It was back in the days of the Brady Bunch, combined families. I call it the
right.
Brady Bunch from hell. You're thrown together, um, and that's it. You're thrown together. This is your brother. This is your sister. We all got adopted together, and and there was some nasty rules imposed. And Rory, and I know you do coaching too. Uh, I've been asked the question before, like just not, like I've had my own coaches or whatever. Do you think you would have turned out the same if your father hadn't left, or if
Hmm.
your mother had married that person?
Right.
It's a really hard question and it's an interesting one to think about. But these were the cards I was dealt. I can fantasize about being an incredible pro football player, but that wasn't in the cards no matter what for me. That didn't change, not big enough. And but they're really you really you learn to survive.
Right.
You really do.
At the end of the day, we are, in a lot of ways, we are the sum of the experiences that, have happened to us, so to speak.
That's
So that's who we are
yeah.
today.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly right. And um, some of these experiences make you stronger. Absolutely. My father, Richard, in the house was a tough man, and he wanted his sons to be tough. So, being strong and fighting was like an important thing to him, that you have to stand up for each other, and but it can go too far. Things can go too far. And I really, there are some good things that came from him, but mostly it was a lot of trauma and abuse.
Yeah. The did the abuse have like a pattern to it? Was it something where you could kind of expect it and maybe, predict it, or was it just totally random? And I have some history in this, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is like my biological father, who's a veterinarian, he wasn't like an ideal father. Again, he was not father of the year. I mean, he left and never came back. But
Right.
even when he was there, he was pretty tough also. And men of that generation, men of that era, a lot of them, it's common for take out the belt and all those kinds of things.
Right.
What was when you asked about things, whether things were random or not, we were not allowed to walk in the front door of our house. One of the rules is we had to walk around to the back of the house, to walk in the house. I mean, and we weren't allowed to sit in the furniture, and we were not allowed in the kitchen while my parents were eating. So we never ate a meal. Like the whole thing, family gathering at the meal, you read all, see all these great things. We weren't allowed to be in the room when they were eating. We were fed separately. Anyway, one day it was a rainy day, and my father usually was gone. He would go play golf on Saturdays, and he didn't. And because he was going to be in the house, I knew I needed to get away, because you wind up hiding. And I remember my
Uh,
friend came to pick me up. His mom's in the driveway in her station wagon, beeping the horn. It's raining outside, so I'm gonna roll out the front door. And as I opened the front door to go that way, and I wasn't supposed to, I didn't know that my father had come up from behind me, and he kicked me so hard I went like rolling over the stairs, like into the bushes.
uh,
And I mean, it was like a drop kick. It was like so. Um, it was like minefield, you never and Rory, for me, it wasn't the physical part. Certainly was other times, but it was more the verbal harassment. It was the non-physical abuse, just the constant, you're a loser, you're fat, you're this, you're that. I mean, just calling names, demeaning people, just a real bully.
man, I'm sorry you had to go through that, man. I really am. The well, I want to get to the book here in a minute, but I'm always curious when I talk to folks who have been through this sort of thing. If it's a cognizant thing for you, or if it just comes naturally to you. But how has all of that you went through impacted how you are with your kids today? Now,
Yeah. Um, Boy, that's I really I obviously love my kids, and I made sure I did everything I could to be the model father, whatever that is. I was probably way too easy in a lot of ways, because but my father's two fathers didn't spend 10 minutes with me like my entire childhood. So spending as much time as I could with my kids. I really, and in some ways I think I overcompensated, going through a divorce, having kids. I gave too much away because I didn't want my kids to be in the middle of custody battle and all that. But I think even my exes will say he's a good guy and he's a great father. He just didn't know how to be a great husband. I'm not a cheating husband. I mean, a intimacy, like, I always had this sort of disconnection that I've gone to a lot of therapy for. That protective mechanism when you go through trauma and you're in a house. And so you don't trust when people get that close. But with my kids, man, I love hanging out with my kids. That's why I love when we were talking before the podcast, your boys talking to you and kind of making fun of you. And I love that, man. My kids make fun of me, and but, there was only one that really needed to be disciplined. The other ones were pretty easy.
Oh, you got off easy then. That's all right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and when we're done, I'll tell you what he's like, and you'll say, well, maybe he didn't. So he he's no criminal problems, but he
That's
just is
good.
just
There you
insane.
go. All right. All right. That's kind of the other side of the coin. Whenever we go through these sorts of trauma situations growing up, there's usually two ways where it really impacts us, and it's on us being fathers, because of what we had from our father, but then it's also on being husbands, because of what we witnessed, what we saw, what we thought, and things like that. So it sounds like it took a toll there a little bit with you.
It definitely took a toll. Because of the house I grew up in, and there was so much trauma, and there was so much, I wasn't in a house where, I had a dad that came and told me I was great or I did anything well. It was a complete opposite. That's just a fact. And so I was very insecure, and I wasn't, um, and my sisters used to say, "Oh, Steve, you're really cute. Why don't you talk to these girls?" And I was great with the guys because I like to play sports and all that. But when it came to relationships, it was just really hard for me to get close. And I kept hearing from the women that I would date, you're disconnected, Steve. You're disconnected. There's something they all would say the same thing. Like and I would be like, what do you mean disconnected? Like, I don't get it. What are you talking about? And it's like, you don't give all of yourself. It was just something sort of was missing. And it was a consistent, through my current. So I wound up getting divorced twice. Um, as an example, and I think this is a nice story. It's a good example. Is my wife now? We've been married about 3 years, but we've been together about 10 years. And I adopted her son, and she's fantastic. My wife is she's an amazing person. She's a life coach. She had a child on her own with a donor. She worked for the government, for the Coast Guard for 25 years, designing health and
Wow.
wellness programs. And she's a badass. She was my first girlfriend, man. She was my senior year of college. She was my first girlfriend, like girl that I dated for more than 2 weeks. And we were together a couple years, and then I went to law school, and she worked down in Miami at a fitness place. When she started, when we and we loved each other, but and she spent a lot of time with my family. I spent time with hers. We loved each other. Uh, when we reconnected, through Facebook 30 years later, like literally like 30 years, um, she found me on Facebook, and we connected, and she actually was connecting because there was a guy that she had met online, and I was the only person that we had in common. And anyway, long story short, we started talking. And when I went down to see her, so I went down to see her, and we weren't together then, but I just went down to visit. Hey, I'm divorced and she's single. She'd never been married. And when I went down to see her in Miami, um, and she had spent at least 2 to 3 years with me, I started talking to her about my life, my experiences, and I started talking to her about my biological father, and she's like, "What do you mean your biological father?" I go, "Well, my father that you met, that wasn't really my father. He adopted me." And she was like, "What are you talking about? You never told me that." I go, "Yeah, those brothers and sisters, they are all adopted. My last name was something else." And she's like, and she started to cry, and she's like,
Hmm.
"You never told me any of these things, like any of those things that happened to you." And I actually lived in Israel, lived on a kibbutz, done all these things. I never told her any of that. I'm like, and she's like, she's like, "What did we do?" I go, "Well, obviously had a lot of fun, but back then didn't do a lot of talking. I guess I wasn't a big talker. That's the intimacy part."
Right.
And well, I could not, it was really interesting, Rory, to meet her, and she knew the young me, and I was carrying this stuff around, and I never shared any of it. She had no idea at all that of my story. And when she heard it, she started to cry, and she said, "I always knew you were carrying something dark around with you, and I always loved you, but we could just never get over that." And that was really meaningful.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine, and she thought that she knew you from before, and now she realizes she didn't even really know you back then because you weren't
Yeah.
you weren't talking about this stuff. it's like you and I talked before the show. It's not easy to talk about. It's
No.
just not that easy to talk about it. And those intimacy issues they're real. When you've had your trust broken, you don't just open yourself back up to the next person, who comes
Yeah.
along.
Yeah. No,
So very normal.
no, right, right. And a lot of the stuff, um, you don't want to sound like I never wanted to be that weak guy that walked around complaining, oh, I got beat up when I was a child or
Right.
whatever. I was not gonna, I didn't tell anybody that, I was even though people knew I came from a weird family situation, um, nobody knew the truth. And some of the stuff you bury so deep inside you, you just don't even feel it. And there are parts of me, and I talk about this in the book, there are parts of me still, although I'm working on it, where I have like no emotion, no feeling. You know, my biological father, when he died, and when my other father died, I have no feelings for them. I could really now it changed because of the book, but um, I call it the feeling of no feeling. Like it's you're just kind of dead inside. And I'm less dead now than I was, but I think that's because when you're young and you get those things happen to you, you have to protect yourself.
For sure. Now, is that part of where the title comes from? Pretend that they're dead?
Yes, the title. Uh, so the book, covers sort of my whole life, but really just the relationships with my fathers and how it progressed and the stories of how things progress, good, bad, ugly, all those things.
Sure.
And one of the things that happened that I learned is my biological father he was a veterinarian in the same town, and we never saw him. And then when I was 17 years old. And I don't mind sharing this. I've shared this many times before, but when I was 17 years old, I was working at a tennis court, was by myself, and and it was the 4th of July, 1975, tells you how old I am. Um, and but I was by myself, which is kind of weird because it was 4th of July and there's nobody on the courts, and I was sweeping the courts. And as I was sweeping the courts, I heard this. I was right by the road, the end court by the road. I hear this tires squeal, and all of a sudden, this car comes out of control, hits a telephone pole, probably 20 yards or less from where I was. And I was just a kid, man, and I mean, I'd never seen a car accident or like that. And a guy went through the windshield, and I went running around to see, and then I went and ran to the payphone, like my heart's pumping. I'm just I don't like it's like slow motion. It's like you're in this dream. It's surreal. Like this is happening to you. My adrenaline's pumping. I get on there and I call the operator, because you didn't have 911 in New Jersey then. And
Right.
anyway, I went back up there, and they people came outside, came and the cops came and the ambulance comes, and I'm just standing off to the side. And he had his face was cut in half, basically, very significant injuries. He was unconscious, and they had the guy up against the car. And and I turned to leave, I was okay, this is enough for the day. I'm just gonna go somewhere and get stoned, probably. And it's because that's what happens. You run away from your house, so they're looking for
Right.
the safe place, right?
You got it.
And and anyway, and I turned and I was going to get on my Schwinn 10-speed varsity, blue Schwinn 10-speed varsity. I was very proud of that bike.
You're
And
bringing
took
back
me
memories
everywhere.
right now, man. You really are.
Yeah,
Fla-
it took me everywhere. You
Flashing
remember
back.
that? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's man, 10-speed varsity. It was big.
Hmm.
Anyway, and as I turned around, I felt this like how like you'll be somewhere and you can feel somebody looking at you. Like you just feel this energy. And I'm a spiritual guy. I mean, like I don't, I'm not exactly sure I believe in God and spiritual stuff and all that, but I felt these eyes, like I felt something on me, and I turned, and the guy his eye was cut in half. He was looking at me. He had regained consciousness, and I just like had this whole thing came over my body, and I turned back, and the police officer pulls out his wallet and says, "Does anybody know this man?" And he said his name, and it was my biological father.
That's so crazy.
is
And you hadn't seen him prior to that.
no, no, and I never talk about keeping secrets. I got on my bike and I rode to my house and rode to my friend's house, and I never told anybody that story until I was in my 40s.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't really have anybody to, I don't know. I was really good at compartmentalization and staying tough, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't want to appear weak and all that crap. And I couldn't talk to my mother about it. And I certainly couldn't talk to my adopted father about it. So getting back to the title, and there's plenty of adventures in between, so I'm not giving everything away. I've had an interesting life.
Yeah.
Um, Getting back to the title, I sort of connected with my biological father, and he turned out he had a drug issue. There's all these issues, and I cover them in the book. But he also turned out he was a writer, a really good writer, in addition to being a veterinarian. And he had written tons of magazine articles and books, and I wound up with all of it because I went to his funeral, and I was the only person, basically one of the only people at the funeral, and somebody came up to me. He said, "Do you want his some copies of his writing?" It was his cousin, and one of the things he sent me was the story of the last night he spent with us, and the story was called "Hello Yellow." And he actually wrote a story that got published in the mid 1970s about the last night he spent with his kids, which I'd never seen before. And there's a drawing of a man with his back to his three kids, and because he dropped us off like we were going to see him the next day. But in the story, he says that he went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, the best thing for you is just to pretend they are dead. Just pretend your kids are dead, and that way you can live without them. And that's where the title, Pretend They Are Dead, and that's him on the cover. And that's where the title comes from, because that's exactly what he did.
Jeez. I I mean, there's so many other ramifications to that, that you can get into. But you pretend they're dead. Well, then yeah, it might be easier to get along with the fact that they're no longer in your life. But then you get the grieving process that settles in, whether you like it or not. I can't even imagine that path to go
No,
down.
yeah, and he lived in the same town. He was a veterinarian in the same town. I'd walked by his office probably 100 times, and people like he wasn't allowed to see us. They cut some kind of deal, and he gave us stuff for adoption. And listen, he was not a strong man.
Yeah.
A father who gives up their kids and then
Hmm.
doesn't knock on the door or whatever. But I found out later, of course, that it pretty much ruined his life. And in the car crash, uh, he was severely disabled after that. After that all happened, so. But yeah, he was. Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't imagine that.
Yeah. So you decide you're going to put this into a book. Is this for the therapeutic aspect of doing this? Did you feel like you had to kind of purge this out of your system? Was this for closure? Kind of what was the purpose there?
Um, I think as I wrote it, like the purpose changed because it took me so long. And at the beginning, it was just kind of I had just gotten divorced. I was alone. I wanted to learn to write. I love to write. And when you're a lawyer, you have to write within the boundaries of the law. And there was no AI back then. AI back then. Um,
Right.
and but I I wanted to just put on paper what was in my brain, just kind of let it go. And I had gotten all this writing from him, all this stuff from him, and he had been writing, and so I decided I'm going to just start putting stuff together, like just start writing stories, and and as I went through it, it was extremely therapeutic, um, because I recognized certain things that I had created for myself later on, that and also I realized how much anger I was carrying around. I didn't realize how much anger I had. One of the things that had happened is my senior year of high school, I lived in New Jersey my whole life in the city, urban New Jersey, Wayne, New Jersey, and I went to the same high school, had the same friends. It's going to be my senior year, and your senior is going to be the big man on campus. That's already. and still hadn't dated anybody then. And anyway, and my father, my adoptive father and mother announced that we were moving to Florida, to Sarasota, Florida. And it was right before my senior year of high school. And I fought hard. You know, I didn't want to go, refused to go, didn't have a choice. I had friends whose families would take me in and they said no. And so, wound up, this is the 70s, wound up in Sarasota, which is it's a beautiful place now. And it was a beautiful place then, but Sarasota, Florida back then is a big cattle ranching place. Um, lots of, pickup trucks with guns, which is fine, but I wasn't used to it. I mean, it was actually very safe because these are guys who actually knew what they were doing with the guns. They were shooting people or,
Yeah.
coyotes and all that stuff. But anyway, but it was a totally different experience for me. And so when I moved to Florida and got to Florida, I rebelled. I refused to go to class and did a lot of things I shouldn't have done. But I don't regret them. But in the course of my point is during the course of writing the book, I had never really gone through the anger, realized how much anger I still carried around from that.
Wow. Yeah. Now that you've written the book and it's all done, how do you feel different?
Well, it's when everybody says, "Well, what's the next one going to be about?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'll be an X-rated version. All the stories I couldn't tell, you know, like in my fraternity house and all those things." But no, it felt great to get it done. And listen, I worked really hard. I approached it like, I run marathons, and I approached it like I was training for a marathon. I would, get up every morning, 5 a.m. I'd be sitting at my typewriter, my computer, and work through it. And I found an editor that she helped me through it, and then, looked for an agent, found this great publisher. I'm really blessed. I mean, I really small publishing house. And I had an agent, and she actually passed away during COVID. It's a whole
Oh,
nother story. But she was
yeah,
older, but she really liked my book and my story. And COVID kind of threw everybody in lots of ways for a loop.
for sure.
But I connected with the small publishers. They're called Christmas Lake Creative. They're up at Yale, up in New Haven. Really great people, and we spent a lot of time going back through the book, revising certain things, having me rewrite certain things. I mean, I wrote it, but they went through it all. They loved the story. They love the story, and they really related to it. And a lot of people relate to it. So finishing it, I've learned now that more people relate to it. Everybody has a story, and so many people have had dysfunction or trauma and don't talk about it. And so I've definitely helped people, uh, probably men especially, hey, it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to go to a therapist.
Yeah.
I have a whole chapter in my book about how at the beginning, I wasn't going to go to a therapist, man. I was like, I didn't want to sit in there and have somebody see me, and think like that was all, you're all self-conscious. And that's the old school. But the
Yeah.
reality is, a great therapist or just somebody to talk to, it's really important. So that helped me. And I've been, since the book has come out, so Father's Day release, I've had so many people contact me from my past and strangers, people I don't know, like send me messages and talk about how things that they read in the book inspired them and helped them. So that's been really great.
Glad to hear that. I'm glad that you were able to experience that, through getting the book done, and you answered a whole bunch of other questions that I normally, kind of check off too in terms of, how did you publish and so on. You just rolled right through it, man. That was beautiful. So congrats on being published with a publisher and, going through a publishing house like that. That had to be a great experience.
No, it was, but Roy, I'm a competitive person. I'm a trial lawyer, and I'm a fighter, not in a physical sense, although it's a different thing. But I don't take no for an answer easily. And sending out those query letters, like I went through that whole period to
Yeah.
some of those agents when I wanted to just pick up the phone and say, "Listen, man, you have no like." They send you this. You sent me this like 2 sentence thing back, and I know you didn't even look at what I wrote. Plus, in a query letter, I don't. again, how you could tell a story like mine in like two sentences. I try to, and so, I, and I was taking a workshop, a workshop, and the teacher and I would fight about things because she had this big note up on the board when you're talking about process, and it said right outside the boundaries. And I was in this workshop, and it was mainly women who were writing the stories in the particular class. They were writing their romance novels, whatever it was, and they were very a lot of them were very they're hooked on the grammar, very important to them, grammar and all this. And for me, I just wanted to get stuff down on paper and then get my thoughts down. And if I wanted a sentence to say Fuck period, that's my sentence. And she would say, "You can't do that." I go, "Why not? Why can't I do that? This is my story. This is my book, and this is how I'm writing it." And she was great, but we, there's that middle ground thing there. So, it just but going through that querying process with the agents, my prediction is that's gonna start disappearing. That whole process is gonna start disappearing because of all the online stuff, because of all the indie publishers. um, there's a lot of arrogance in that whole arena. There's tons of great writers out there that I probably collected 50 rejections
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
something like that. None of them bother. It didn't bother me. It really did. Like it. Of course, I wanted to be accepted, but I'd gone to some book like conferences, writers' conferences, and I
hmm.
met with some of the agents, and they don't even look at like some of them don't. They're like looking over your shoulder as they're talking to you, not listening, and I'm not good with that. And so I actually wrote down a few of the agents' names who I felt insulted me because one day when I should send him copies of the book. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this is what you could have had. So,
I love that you're keeping the receipts.
oh,
That's
oh,
what they call it, right? Yeah,
yeah, oh
keeping
yeah,
the
yeah.
receipts, man.
Oh, when I started practicing law, if a lawyer was crossed me, I always, I had a little book with their names because I remember, I'm very on level, very straightforward. I'm very easy to work with. But if you cross me, then, then it's a different Steve. And that comes from growing up in a tough environment. You
Sure.
learn not to put up with certain things.
When you grow up on the East Coast in any capacity, I think that there's, especially in like the New York, New Jersey area, I think there's a
Yeah.
flavor.
Yeah.
There's just kind of that thing that we all carry.
There's that edge. There's that edge.
That's
Did
right.
you grow up there? Did you grow up over there?
Yeah, I was in West Orange, New Jersey, for quite a while, and I was born in New Britain, Connecticut, but then we ended up in West Orange, New Jersey. So I was there quite a bit.
I lived in West Orange. We actually lived in West Orange, New Jersey for a while before we
Uh,
moved to Maine. So
there you go.
yeah, yeah. No, you got the Jersey edge, so you can understand.
There's a little edge there, man. There really is.
And
So
I'm in the Bible Belt, Orlando. Everybody's very polite, even though they don't mean it. So,
right, yeah. I'm
and
in Indiana, man. I mean, there's nothing
oh,
happening out here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right. I love the process too. So you had a very organized process of writing. It sounds like you sit down, churn some things out. Now, did you just like write in pieces and then put them all together, or were you just, writing it in order?
Yeah, I pretty much decided that the best way for me to write this is to tell the story from the beginning to the end, and
Mhm.
then I can move chapters around afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
So that was the easiest way to keep things, straight. And plus, I had gotten thousands of pages of writing that my father had done. He had kept a journal between 1960 and 1990. Every single day of his life, he wrote everything he did, and that's how I found out he had hired a private investigator to find me. That's how he knew I was at the tennis court. Um, and lots of little gems. And that's how I found out that he had taken a bunch of Valium and vodka before he got in the car that day. And I don't know if he would have actually stopped, but he found out that I was working there. So he probably drove by 100 times. I don't know. I never got the chance to ask him.
Mm.
But in all those pages, I was able to track his life at the same time as mine, and also the story of I not when I went when I was in college and decided to confront him. And so that story's in there as well.
Wow.
Um, so it was really, it was, it's really, it's just an amazing, it was an amazing process, but it took a long time to figure out how to put all that together. Um, because there's so much and what to put in there. But yeah, I was organized, and everybody knows you don't talk to Steve in the morning.
Whenever I get that, whenever we're writing our book, right? I think any author, you sit down and you're going to write the book. You have an idea, maybe a vision or a picture, right? This is what it's going to look like when I'm done. This is
Yeah.
what the process is going to be. Here I am with either my money or my fame or my bestseller or whatever it might be, because we all have, hopes for what we're sitting
Yeah,
down to
yeah, of
write, right? So
course.
when you got to the end here, you got it published, right? How did the story differ from what you thought to what actually happened, and what was the biggest surprise in that thing to you, whether it be good or bad?
That's a great question. Um, I think the biggest surprise actually has been how hard it is to sell. That it's a whole nother job.
Yeah.
And my publisher says I'm doing really good and I'm way ahead of the curve for somebody who's done first memoir and all this other stuff. But it's that, and for I know that this is a writer's show, and a lot of your listeners are writers. There's a lot of scammers out there. There's a lot of, that if they find out you wrote a book, or that you're writing a book, there's just so you really have to screen people.
Oh yeah.
That was a big surprise, and the whole process of trying to market the book. Get it in your local bookstore. My book, which has sold really a decent number of copies. I have like 170 reviews now on Amazon or whatever. I haven't
Nice.
looked exactly in Goodreads, and but this the small mom and pop bookstore, uh, because I'm a nobody, it's hard to get in. So that's been a surprise. How challenging the selling of the book has been. And then uh, and I said I have high standards, so I probably am like my publisher keeps saying, Steve, you're way ahead of the curve. But anyway, and then the other when you said, which was a really good question, what was the book? What I thought it would be. Um, I really think it's I poured my heart into it, and I think it came out uh, as good or better than I ever imagined it would.
Yeah.
And especially incorporating some of these things. There's a lot of things I had to leave out that um, I think were really meaningful, but the book can, like for example, I represented, it meant a lot to me. I was a volunteer lawyer for 9/11 firefighters,
Mhm.
and tried a bunch of cases in New York in front of Kenneth Feinberg. There's a movie called Worth, where Kenneth Feinberg was basically the judge who ran the 9/11 Victims Recovery Fund that President Bush set up, so that all the airlines didn't go out of business because all the families would have, sued the airlines. So instead, he set up a victims recovery fund, and victims of 9/11 were entitled to, apply for a certain amount of benefits. And Kenneth Feinberg was the person who determined how much each family got. And I was one of the lawyers that represented the families in front of, it was in front of Feinberg and their lawyer. Wasn't really adversarial as much as, how do you decide what the case is worth? And anyway, the I had to leave all that out, but I did. I represented some families and that firefighters who were actually pretty well known, and I'm still in touch with some of the families and the kids. And but I had one firefighter who had two families, unbeknownst to the two
Oh
wives.
wow.
Those kinds of, so I had to leave a lot of those stories out, but I got a lot out of that. And one of the things I did, and I think you'll appreciate having your kids, is I brought my son up to one of the hearings in New York. So here I was, an Orlando lawyer representing victims of 9/11 up in New York City. And I brought one of my sons up there to watch, and he was probably 10 years old. And Ken Feinberg, incredible guy. If you Google the movie Worth, you'll read all about it. But
Sure.
Feinberg talked to my son and all that. My son wound up becoming a lawyer himself after that, and I'm really, proud of him. He really was inspired by that.
That's awesome. That really is awesome. I appreciate your candor, in answering that question too, because I think we all want to go, oh no, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. And deep down, we're
Yeah,
like, wow, this did not go the way I thought.
yeah, yeah. It's. Um, I think you're getting to know my personality a little bit, but it is my mission. It is my goal to, when my book becomes a bestseller and I'm making millions of dollars and it's a huge movie, is to stand in front of that bookstore and tell them you're not selling my book here because you did not even give me the chance to put my little book on your shelf, local author. You know, I mean, they probably would if I pushed it hard enough, but you know, they had, and so. Yeah, no, I'm nicer than that, but you know what it is a challenge, right?
Yeah,
It's a challenge.
it's a challenge, and I think most of us as authors, we simply can't treat the book like it's all business because your book is so personal.
Right,
So, the
absolutely.
rejection of it in any way is personal, no
Yeah.
matter how you look at it. 100%.
Yeah, and or you can't get people to read it, not people who buy it, but just like, reviewers or people with some kind of stature that might help you. You cannot get them to read it. I have a great chapter in there. You'll definitely appreciate this too, about Tug McGraw.
Yeah,
About I had an interaction with Tug McGraw,
yeah,
and I remembered it my entire life. And I, ran into him when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I tried to get and he died from brain cancer, and he didn't know he wound up, Tim McGraw wound up meeting him like when he was a teenager. So he had sort of similar story in the sense that he didn't know his father until later on. And I've tried to get somebody in the McGraw family or the McGraw Foundation to, like, can you at least read my book, or have one of them, like, I wrote this chapter and it's a really meaningful thing that your father did for me, and I'd like to, pay it back, I guess.
neat. All right,
Yeah,
and that's in the book. That's in the book.
that's
All
in the
right, so
book.
everybody's got to get in, got to buy the book, then you get to hear that part of the story.
You're probably, yeah, that's right. You're probably a Mets fan back then.
I was a Mets fan for a little while, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All
That's
right,
right.
that Jersey edge, man, coming through all the way to the end.
That's that's right. That's right. Gotta keep
I love it. All
yeah,
right, Steve, before we wrap up, I still have another question I want to ask you, but before we do that, give everybody your contact info. If they want to know more about you, find the book, more about the book, things like that, what's the best way for them to go look it up, to reach you, etc.?
sure. Well, the book itself, of course, the name is easy. Pretend They Are Dead, A
Hmm.
Father's Search for the Truth. My name is a little harder, but the my author's webpage is www.stepheneichenblatt.com, Eichenblatt. And so that's one way, or my law firm, which is Page and Eichenblatt in Orlando, Florida. But I'd certainly love for people to take a look at it and let me know what they think. And I spent a lot of time doing GAL stuff, and people who are in tough family situations or have questions about the law or what to do, man, you can email me or reach out to me. I've lived it. When you've lived it, it's a lot easier to help other people who are going through it.
Right, right on. I'll definitely have that in the show notes for everybody. As we're kind of wrapping up here, you've succeeded. I mean, you have headed out to be an author. You set out to be an author. You went through the process. You took years to do it. You put out a book that you feel good about. You're published. And so you are a published author at this point, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are going to listen to this, who are going to, be wishing that they could become actual published authors. So, what's the best piece of advice you have for people who, want to become what you are, and they're just not quite where you are yet?
Boy, that's a great, that really is, that's a great question. I mean, my advice is if it's something that you really want, like I mentioned earlier, running a marathon is you have to set a schedule and set a goal and go for it and don't be discouraged. Never, never, never quit, be determined. Because you're doing something that not many people do. There's lots of people that say, "Oh, I want to write a book," or still have somebody write it for them. But if you want to sit down and do it, you just, and I think it's important too, you find a comfortable space, like an area that inspires you and it helped me to do it the same time every day because that was it made it I made it a habit, and I think that's really important. Is if you want to finish it, you have to make it a habit and put everything down in your brain on paper. Just put it down. Don't worry about the grammar, the spelling, any of that stuff. Just throw it down on the pages. You'll have plenty of time to go back. And there are definitely times when I would do that and I would go look at myself the next day and I would say, I cannot believe I wrote that. That is so bad. That's embarrassing, or I'd write something and I go, wow, I can't believe I wrote that. That's really good, man. Well, that's wow. So, set your schedule, set the goal, and just keep at it. And don't be somebody who said, oh, I want to write a book or I wanted to, just do it.
That is such great advice, Steve. Thank you for that, man. I appreciate it. I know everybody who's listening to this is going to appreciate it. I cannot wait to pick this book up and read it, man. I just can't. I think it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be tough for me to get through, but I'm going to, and I'm going to let you know when I do, just so you know.
Yeah, no, please stay in touch, Rory. Really,
I'm looking forward to it, man. I really, really am.
absolutely.
The folks, we've got a writer, father, trial lawyer, author of Pretend They Are Dead, Stephen Eichenblatt. Steve, thank you for being on the show today, brother, and for sharing what you have, the way you have. It means a lot, and it was great having you on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, you got it, folks. It's been another awesome episode of the Right Path podcast, where the truth still counts and words still have power. This is the place where authors know that every page is a step forward. So let's lift each other up, let's dust ourselves off, and let's move forward together.